If you've ever sat in a room full of people, maybe even people you like, people you've known for years, and suddenly felt a quiet, creeping sensation that you are entirely separate from them, like you are watching the gathering through a pane of thick, soundproof glass. You might smile, you might laugh at the right moments, but internally, there is a subtle, heavy disconnect. You are physically present, but psychologically, you feel like a foreign exchange student who missed orientation and never quite mastered the language. People who experience this often don't realize that this feeling isn't a personality flaw. It's not just shyness, and it's not your typical social anxiety. It is a deeply ingrained psychological pattern. It doesn't look like a big deal from the outside. You probably pass as perfectly normal, maybe even highly sociable. But inside, it says much more about your psychological history than you think. Think about the subtle, almost invisible things you do. Before you enter a social setting, you might unconsciously brace yourself. You scan the room, not just looking at who is there, but taking the emotional temperature. Who is loud? Who is stressed? What is the expected energy here? You don't just walk into a room and exist. You calibrate. You adjust your tone, your posture, and even your opinions to harmonize with the people around you. It's a quiet form of mirroring. You become whatever the room needs you to be so that you don't disrupt the peace. And when you finally leave, you are completely exhausted. Not necessarily because the people were awful or the event was bad, but because you were working. You were performing a highly complex psychological task. You were managing your own safety by meticulously managing everyone else's perception of you. This is where the feeling of being perpetually out of place really takes root. You might think you feel disconnected because you haven't found your tribe, or because there is something fundamentally incompatible about you. But the psychological reality is very different. You feel disconnected because the version of you that is interacting with the world is heavily curated. It is a buffer, and a buffer cannot feel genuine connection. When people praise you, or like you, or invite you to things, a quiet, skeptical voice in the back of your mind probably whispers, "They don't really like me. They like the version of me I'm showing them. If they saw the real me, I wouldn't belong here either." To understand this, we have to look at where this begins. The feeling of being an outsider isn't something you are born with. It is an identity you learn. Almost always, this develops in individuals who grew up in environments where their authentic, baseline self wasn't quite a match for their surroundings. Maybe you were a highly sensitive child in a family that valued toughness and stoicism. Maybe you grew up in a household with unpredictable moods, where you had to learn how to read the room before you spoke, just to avoid triggering a conflict. Or perhaps you moved frequently, perpetually being the new kid who had to figure out the local social dynamics from scratch every few years. In those formative years, your brain realized something quietly devastating. Just being yourself wasn't going to work here. It wasn't emotionally safe, or it wasn't accepted, or it just caused too much friction. So, you adapted. You became highly observant. You learned to study human behavior like an anthropologist. You figured out what made people angry, what made them comfortable, and what made them look the other way. You learned how to blend into the wallpaper. That's not weakness, it's protection. It is a brilliant, highly effective survival strategy created by a mind that just wanted to be safe. And here's where it gets interesting. You spend your whole life thinking that your problem is that you don't belong. You think you are broken because you can't seem to just fit in effortlessly like everyone else. But the real reason isn't what most people think. It's not about confidence, and it's not a lack of social skills. It isn't that you lack the ability to connect. It's that you have confused adaptation with connection. Because you became so incredibly good at adapting, at being the chameleon, you lost touch with the very core of your identity. You spent so much time asking, "What does this room need me to be?" that you completely stopped asking, "Who am I when the room is empty?" This is why you feel out of place everywhere. You belong everywhere a little bit, but nowhere completely. When you rely on mirroring to survive social interactions, you never give the world a solid shape to hold onto. You are like water, pouring yourself into whatever container you are handed. Water fits perfectly into a glass, a bowl, or a vase, but water doesn't have a shape of its own. This constant shape-shifting creates a profound, quiet crisis of identity. When you don't have a solid sense of self, every interaction feels like a test you haven't studied for. You overthink texts, agonizing over the punctuation, wondering if a period makes you sound too aggressive, or if an exclamation mark makes you look desperate. You avoid confrontation at all costs because standing your ground requires actually having ground to stand on. It requires an identity that says, "This is what I believe, and I am emotionally equipped to handle it if you disagree." Instead, you stay quiet. You let others pick the restaurant, the movie, the topic of conversation. You think you are just being easygoing. But psychologically, you are avoiding the vulnerability of having a preference. Having a preference means taking up space. It means risking the possibility that your preference might clash with someone else's. And to the mind that is wired to feel like an outsider, a clash feels like a threat of exile. There is a unique kind of grief that comes with living this way. It is the grief of the eternal observer. You watch people fall in love, form deep, chaotic friendships, and navigate the world with a messy authenticity. You see them make mistakes, say the wrong things, and still get loved anyway. And from your side of the glass wall, it seems like magic. You wonder how they can be so reckless with their image and still belong. But what you are witnessing isn't magic. It is just the natural byproduct of living from the inside out, rather than the outside in. People who feel a deep sense of belonging don't feel it because they are perfect or because they always say the right thing. They feel it because they are allowing themselves to be seen. Belonging doesn't require you to be identical to the people around you. It requires you to be visible to them. And this is the paradox of the chronic outsider. The very defense mechanism you use to avoid being rejected is the exact thing preventing you from being accepted. By hiding your true thoughts, your strange quirks, your unpopular opinions, and your genuine needs, you are rejecting yourself before the room even gets a chance to. You have built a fortress to keep the pain out, but the fortress is keeping you trapped inside. Understanding this is a quiet, structural shift in how you view your entire life. It means looking back at all the times you felt awkward, disconnected, or alien, and realizing that you weren't failing at being human. You were just succeeding perfectly at a survival strategy you outgrew a long time ago. You don't feel out of place because you are destined to wander the earth alone. You feel out of place because you have been trying to belong as an echo of other people's expectations. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. You start to notice the moments you shrink, the moments you swallow your words, the moments you put on the mask before walking out the front door. And that awareness alone changes how you move through the world. You realize that belonging was never about finding the perfect room where everyone is exactly like you. It was about walking into any room and finally deciding to bring yourself with you. It was never random. It was just a pattern. If this explains something for you today, there's much more to uncover about how we build the walls around our minds. Understanding yourself is the beginning of everything.